everybody. My name is Shonda Lobatos, and we are going to be presenting the Comprehensive Sexuality presentation. We have mass resistance, PUFPAC, and advocating justice for children, or for kids, sorry. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so we're talking about comprehensive sexuality education throughout the public school environment. The Comprehensive Sexuality Education Law. The California Healthy Youth Act, CHIA, was effective January 1st, 2016, also known as Assembly Bill AB 329. This was brought by Weber from San Diego, who is a Democrat, who requires districts to provide an integrated course of comprehensive sexual health education and HIV prevention education to students grades 7 through 12. One time in junior high school and one time in high school. Now, this is a side note right here. It's very important to realize that districts can implement this as much as they want and at any grade they want, as long as it is developmentally appropriate. So let's look at the definition of comprehensive sexuality education. This is a right-based approach to comprehensive sexuality education, also known as CSE. It seeks to equip young people with the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values they need to determine and enjoy their sexuality, physically and emotionally, individually and in relationships. It looks at sexuality holistic as a whole, as a part of a young person's emotional and social development. It also recognizes that the information alone is not enough. So young people need to be given the opportunity to acquire these essential life skills and develop positive attitudes and values towards sexuality. So this is basically the comprehensive sexuality outline. CSE covers a broad range of issues related to the physical, biological, emotional, and social aspects of sexuality. This approach recognizes and accepts all people as sexual beings and is concerned with more than just the prevention of disease and pregnancy. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit. All people as sexual beings, that means from birth. CSE programs should be adapted to the age and stage development of the targeted group. So that's from the beginning, when you're born. That's why you're seeing all of this information coming in at the elementary school level. Under comprehensive sexuality education, there are 7 components. The first component is gender. And what this is establishing the difference between gender and sex, exploring gender roles and attributes, understanding perceptions of masculinity and femininity within the family, and across the life cycle, society's changing norms and values, manifestation and consequences of gender biases, stereotypes and inequality, including self-stigmatization. Okay, I'm going to break this down. This is a big paragraph, but reading this as a parent, you're like, oh, that doesn't sound too bad, right? Okay, so let's look at it. So this is an example of gender defined within CSE. Gone are all the days of male and female, declares the Human Rights Campaign and other activist groups. For years, now these groups have been encouraging school districts to push the concept of blending genders and descriptive expressive titles in an all-out effort to accelerate forced acceptance of the LGBT under the guise of the new civil rights movement. What is being taught in our schools and at universities is moving away from our established old world binary understanding of gender, which is male and female, to a more progressive and mainstream tolerant viewpoint of gender fluidity. So that's going between male and female, just going back and forth, where each individual is able to decide and explore their sexual interests, behaviors, and identities, and as they establish those identities, each person is free to change and morph from day to day based on how they feel, express, or identify themselves. One could find themselves anywhere on this multiple colored chart illustrated for their preference of sexual orientation. So everything that I said, lots of words, let's break it down so everyone understands it, because this is what they're going to present to you and tell you it's okay. So we're looking at this, I don't know how many genders they're saying, like 98 at this point. So we have male and female, which the male is on the right side, and we have female. In between here is the range of where you have homosexual, bisexual. You have intersex, amphiphilic, I don't even know all the words. This is the spectrum that they're speaking about, that how you feel, what you look like. If you're born biologically female, your gender expression could be a male, but yet you could be bisexual or homosexual depending on the day. That's basically what all the words said. So moving on to this chart, this breaks down what we're talking about. This is the genderbread person. So we're going to identify what we are. We're going to talk about what we're attracted to and how we want to express ourselves outwardly in clothing, but what is our biological sex? This is called the genderbread person. Now, prior to the gender spectrum range, this is how it looked before, gender spectrum. You were male or female. Anything that was sliding in between was considered a mental disorder. So there was, whether it was bipolar, borderline, typically sometimes when people are on the ASD spectrum, which is autism spectrum disorder, they would have this sliding of gender confusion, identity issues. So when we're looking at traditional gender stereotypes, we have female and femininity and masculinity. So females typically are pink, non-aggressive, dependent, easily influenced, submissive, passive, home-oriented, easily hurt emotionally, indecisive, talkative, gentle, and so forth. Masculinity is defined as aggressive, independent, not easily influenced, dominant, active, worldly, not easily hurt emotionally, decisive. These are the traditional gender stereotypes which they want to eliminate, and they're in the process of doing. Their objective is to destroy gender norms and have respect for gender identity and support gender expression. So now we're moving on to the second component out of 7. This is the portion that talks about sexuality and reproductive health and HIV. The first part is sexuality and the life cycle. When we talk about puberty, menopause, the stigmas of if you're a certain, like say for example, you want to be LGBT and the stigma associated with that. Sexual problems, autonomy and reproductive processes. This is the sexuality portion. Also how to use condoms, pregnancy options, understanding HIV, virginity, sexual responses, such as social expectations in between relationships, self-esteem and empowerment, and respect for your body, myths and stereotypes. This is all under component 2. Component 3, sexual rights and citizenships. So this is the knowledge of international human rights and national policies, laws, and structures that relate to people's sexual right-based approach to sexual and reproductive health. This is through social, cultural, and ethnic barriers to exercise rights related to sexual and reproductive health. To understand that sexuality and culture are diverse and dynamic. To make available services and resources and how to access them. This is for participation, practices and norms, diversity of sexual identity, advocacy, choice, protection, negotiation skills, consent, and the right to have sex only when you are ready. The right to freely express and explore one's sexuality in a safe, healthy, and pleasurable way. So basically, everyone has this right from birth. So let's look at a documentation that was created in, I think it was 1968, and this is the Children's Sexual Bill of Rights, and it goes through all of these steps, that there should be legal protection, that the child's right it's a certain pronoun, it's called COS, C-O-S, own person, sexual information, emotional growth, also sensual pleasures, learning the art of love, choice of sexual partners, protection from sex suppression, and then opportunity to acknowledge sexuality. So if you recall, there were several bills that were trying to take away affirmation when a child was struggling with gender identity, to take away the therapy. This is part of the Sexual Bill of Rights. All of this is to eliminate children not being able to have their rights of sex according to CSE.
Who wrote this and where's this from?
I can give you, it was made out of San Diego. I can give you the information. Like this document is very hard to find. So it's a very bad quality, but I wanted to make it, it's 1966. I wanted to make it available so everyone could see that this has been going on for quite some time.
Is this in the Kinsey Road or?
Yeah, that whole outline that we have that starts from the 30 with Margaret Sanger. Okay, it's all of that. Okay, so this is also one that was created in 1977, which is your choice of sexual partner, and then protection from sex suppression. So if a child wants to be 5 years old and have sex, they shouldn't be suppressed not to be able to have sex. So component number 4 is pleasure. Positive approach to young persons like sexuality. Understanding that sex should be enjoyable and consensual. Understanding that sex is much more than just sexual intercourse. Sexuality as a healthy and normal part of everybody's life. The biology and emotions behind the human sexual response. Understanding of gender and pleasure. Sexual well-being. Safe sex practices. Pleasures, masturbation, love, lust, and relationship. The diverse sex. First time having sex, communication, stigmas regarding sexuality. Basically what this is saying is that everyone should be allowed to have sexuality. They should enjoy it, and it should be consensual. And no matter if you choose to be between a boy or girl, or girl and girl, boy, boy, whatever you want to do, it's okay. And the biology behind it and the emotions behind sexual response are okay. Being able to have pleasure, to explore, to masturbate, love, but not only love, but lust after someone, which objectifies the person. The diverse of sex. So going along that continuum. Talking about virginity, communication between talking to your sexual partner, and any of the stigmas, like for example, we say, it's not a good idea to have sex before marriage, or maybe you should wait until you're responsible to have a child so you don't resort to abortion. Saying that these stigmas are connected to sexuality. Component number 5, violence. This is exploring the various types of violence towards men and women, how they manifest, particularly gender-based violence. So this is going back to the spectrum. Non-consensual sex, and understanding what is acceptable, rights and laws, support options available in seeking it, community norms and myths regarding power and gender, prevention, including personal safety, self-defense techniques, understanding the dynamic between victims and abusers, appropriate referral mechanisms for survivors, prevent the victim from becoming a perpetrator, men and boys as victims. So what's really important to realize here is that they're attempting, yes sir.
Can we take a break?
Hi.
I don't mean to interrupt. I'm so sorry. Am I allowed to live stream it?
No, we're not doing live streams right now.
Okay, totally fine.
Yes.
Sit down and write stuff down, please.
Okay. What we want to look at is that they're really pushing for consent with the kids. For the children to understand, oh, did you say yes? Do you not want it? Is this, sexual abuse? Are you okay with this type of behavior? And working with children and understanding that the brain doesn't develop until 25 years old, and that all of this is within the gray area, how are children supposed to differentiate these complex subject matters? It's very difficult. Diversity. So this is component 6. So recognizing and understanding the range of diversity in our lives, which is faith, culture, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, disability and ability, HIV status, and sexual orientation. A positive view of diversity, recognizing discrimination, its damaging effects, and being able to manage it. Developing a belief in equality, supporting young people to move beyond just tolerance. So this diversity is where they're bringing in Diversity Week. This is where they're having the protest. This is where they're saying, oh, you're discriminating against me, and they're bringing in other types of support systems under different policies, under harassment policies, under Title IX, under assemblies. This is where all this is being pulled in for the name of tolerance of being diverse. So then we move to component number 7, which is relationships. So the different types of families, friends, sexual, romantic, etc. That relationships are constantly changing, emotions, intimacy, which is emotional and physical. The rights and responsibilities of these relationships, which may include power dynamics, recognizing healthy and unhealthy or coercive relationships, having communication and trust and honesty in relationships, also dealing with peer pressure and social norms, that love and sex are not the same. So just breaking down what the relationships are in between understanding sexuality. Now, what does comprehensive sexuality education and the 7 components mean? CSE AB 329 with the 7 components together create sexual right-based perspective. This means to be safe between any gender with your sexual rights to have consensual, pleasurable, exploratory sexual behavior without violence and accepting diversity with your relationships. This is a right-based perspective, and it's the foundation of the curriculum being used within the public educational system. So it's important for you to understand there's the law and there's the curriculum. You don't always have to use the curriculum that's going with the law. So those are 2 different things. So this is an example of Sexual Bill of Rights within Teen Talk, which is a sex rights-based curriculum. Right here, it explains that it's your Sexual Bill of Rights, that they're giving this information to the children. Now, it says it's mandatory at 7th and at 11th grade, but remember, districts can bring it in at any age as long as it is developmentally appropriate. But being that I have a master's degree in psych and I have an undergraduate in child development in psych, I'm not sure a child should have any type of sexual right permission if they're under 18 and they can't support a child. Not sure how that logically rationalizes itself. So where does the idea of sexual rights come from? Anybody know this guy? Kinsey, yes.
Wait, what's his name?
Right here.
Oh.
Alfred Kinsey. Okay, so Alfred Kinsey was born in 1894. He transitioned in 1956 and was an American biologist, professor of entomology and zoology. He was a sexologist who in 1947 founded the Institute of Sex Research at Indiana University, previously known as Kinsley Institute for Research in Sex, Gender, and Reproduction. So what did Kinsey believe? From birth, we are sexual. He believed that sexuality was on a scale. And he set out to prove that we were sexual at birth. Now, what you're looking at is a chart that comes from his book called Sexual Behavior in Human Males. And this is the age all the way on the far left, the number of orgasms from these children,
Oh my God.
the time involved, the age, the number of orgasms, and the time involved. This is what he constructed that humans from birth are sexual.
So let me just take plain thing. He abused children from 5 months to 14 years. Just tell them like a TI is molested children.
Right, exactly.
So,
I've always wondered, it's such a sordid subject, so did he do this or did he have a?
He did
I'm
it,
so sorry
and
to ask this, but-
no, you're fine. He did it, but it's also combined with the memoirs of many people. So it gets kind of graphic. He would get the memoirs from people that were pedophilic, that had incestuous relationships, that were criminals, and he would collect all this data information. This was actually done in his laboratory. I don't know the details of it, but they even said that he was a pedophile and that he was on the spectrum too, that he went between men and women as well.
It's not like he can take this pedophile's word like, oh, this child had 10 orgasms and this. It's like these people are just saying this from their supposed
Their memoirs,
recalled memory, and it's like,
yeah, there were memoirs that he would receive and accept.
Wow.
Yeah.
there's nothing acceptable about any of that.
So Kinsey, utilizing the data in these tables and other equally questionable findings, which I just mentioned right now, this is saying it vaguely, he created a field that advocates for the normalization of sex between adults and children, including infants and youth, as well as sex with animals. This included the memoirs of sexually exploratory individuals, as I mentioned before, and then I'm going to show you guys the scale. So this is the scale, and there's a rating. So 0 is for the heterosexual, going all the way across to number 6, which is exclusively homosexual. So, Kinsey, Comprehensive Sexuality Education and Curriculum. The curricula that has been recommended by the state for comprehensive sexuality education has Kinsey's work throughout it. This curricula are also called comprehensive sexuality, comprehensive sex education, sometimes called sexual risk reduction. So it's important to understand that there's 2 types of curricula that can fall into 2 different types of categories. Examples of curricula that are CSE or SSR curricula are Teen Talk, Positive Preventative Plus. So if you've got these in the schools, then you're getting Kinsey hardcore that children are sexual at birth. So you're going to have to expect that even though this is the curriculum, they have other ways that they're bringing it into the school, and they're doing a global implementation of sexual education across the school with the children. And basically, you can call this a cognitive behavior modification program, because I'm giving you information, I'm constantly giving it to you so I can alter your behavior. So that's something to think about. It's not just this curriculum, it's not just this law, it's coming through every angle. So, a replacement for SSR curricula is SRA. So, SRA is sexual risk avoidance or abstinence centered education. An example of SRA is Aspire, the Heart Education and Relationship Training, which Downey is in the process of getting that adopted in as well. I think also Orange County is getting that adopted in. So how to not expose your children to the mandated AB 329. So parents are allowed to opt their children out of AB 329. Parents can contact the school and request children not to participate. Okay, great. But let's look at this. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question regarding the curriculum, because I know it's not just sex ed classes, it's throughout, like, it's being taught in in history, in science, it's all throughout, right? It's
Yeah.
not just specifically sex ed anymore, it's all being inserted in different
Everywhere,
subjects.
everywhere. Okay, so I'll explain that one too. So right now, when we look at the comprehensive sexuality education within the public school system, we're looking at SB 48, which is through the social studies, that everyone that is under Educational Code 220 must be represented in social studies. So it could be culture, it could be race, it could be the LGBT. That has to be mentioned as early as, I think it's second grade that they're doing that, where they talk about different types of sexuality and that they did certain attributes to society. The next one is AB 329, which we spoke about. I'm just going to go down these because I'll give examples.
I want to ask a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So they're sneaking it in outside of the parents' refusal to allow their children to be exposed to it, but they're getting exposed to it through other courses that the child is there.
But not just courses. So look at all of this. You've got AB 2166, and I'll go through the details of it. Yes, huh?
I think it's 1266.
It is 1266.
So
No, you're good, thank you. I flipped it around. We have assemblies, we have campus clubs, we have district-wide trainings,
Yep.
we have harassment policies, we have links, we have online digital library, we have teachers' personal libraries, we have third parties, we have Title IX, and we have SB 48. It's not just AB 329. And even if you get that curriculum replaced, doesn't matter because you've got so many other components bringing in sexuality throughout the whole school.
Where does Safe Zones fall here?
I believe they put that under Title IX
Got it. Okay.
because they don't want to be harassed. And so if you have someone coming on campus and saying, hey, I don't feel comfortable, then they're going to put a safe space for that person, which is Safe Zones, which comes from Glenson. Yes?
Okay, because that's going to be for all these other kids that are outside of like college courses, right? Because I remember Title IX being in college, but how does that implement into all these young kids?
Well, that's how it's coming in is the LGBT. Like they can't be discriminated with sports and things like that and harassment. Like it's all overlapping and blending. So that's how they're bringing it in is through harassment policies and through Title IX. Okay, so here we're talking about SB 48, which Dora had mentioned. SB 48, which was brought in by Leno, is public pupil instruction, prohibition of discriminatory content. So existing laws requires instructions in social studies to include a study of the role and contributions of both men and women and specified categories of persons to the development of California and of the United States. So this bill would update references to certain categories of persons and additionally would require them have instructions in social studies to include studies of the role and contributions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Americans, persons with disabilities, and members of other cultural groups to the development of California and the United States. So, Let's look at an example that's in, I believe this one was in a second grade.
Oh my
Harvey
God.
Milk. He's his quality was that he was honest. He was also he was also a pederast. He liked young boys, and he's being celebrated as a hero. Yeah, he's already in the social study books. The next one is Galvin Newsom.
Oh, really?
Champion of civil rights.
Can't grow up in.
So he's being represented in the social skills groups, the social studies with SB 48 as well.
They put him in the book before he ran for office.
Yeah.
Isn't that just sick?
Yes.
So here's the other bill I was speaking about that I flipped the numbers on, AB 1266. This is sex-segregated school programs and activities. So existing law prohibits public schools from discriminating on the basis of specified characteristics, including gender, gender identity, gender expression, and specified various statements of legislative intent and the policies of the state in that regard. So basically what you're saying is that they can't discriminate against people of these categories. So let's look at this further. Let's ask this question. On January, sorry about that, you guys. On January 1st, 2014, California became the first state to enact the transgender student right law, allowing transgender students to choose which bathroom and locker room they want to use. So a question, has your child had another student in their locker room with a different gender than him or her? Has your child been in the bathroom with a different gender? No one knows this. Have they give parents notification of this law that if a child is of the opposite gender, they can go in the bathroom, and that the bathrooms are open, even though they say boy and girl, that it doesn't matter, you can switch bathrooms. No notification to the parents. This was back in, when was this? 2015. San Francisco school adopts gender neutral bathrooms. 2015. Here's an example of what you would see. All gender restroom, and then you see the signs over here. So now we're moving on to assemblies. School assemblies, defined as gathering of all or part of a school for any variety of purposes, such as special programs and communicating information on a daily or weekly basis. In some schools, students gather to perform common songs or prayer and receive common announcements. A routine attendance check may also be done in such gatherings. At larger schools, these morning rituals may be substituted by smaller classroom assemblies and announcements broadcast over the public address system. Periodic school assemblies are also a forum for special presenters of education, health, or safety materials, or for school plays, talent, shows, etc. So, question, what assemblies have occurred at your child's school? Who are the presenters? They're not obligated to tell you who's coming into the schools. They don't have to tell you what their backgrounds are or what they're advocating for. They don't need to tell you anything. Question, what assemblies have occurred at your child's school? Who were the presenters? What was the content? So, this is something that came through my children's school. They were going to have a diversity week. So let's talk about this one. Ideas to create diversity awareness through assemblies. An example is making October as Diversity Awareness Month. So it's a great time to host an assembly to help your children welcome the beautiful differences amongst themselves, their classmates, and society as a whole. We have some school assembly ideas to celebrate diversity awareness in your school. So let's go ahead and look. So diverse lesson plans for your school, gender and LGBTQ inclusivity. So this talks about lesson plans to develop LGBT inclusivity in the elementary schools, lesson plans to prevent bullying and bias-based, also lesson plans to help students understand gender and to support transgender and non-binary children, lesson plans to embrace family diversity. So the family diversity would be like if two moms are together or two dads, etc. Now, they don't need to tell you about this. They don't need to tell you because this is done through assemblies. They don't have to tell you who's coming in. They don't need to tell you all this stuff. So this actually came from Welcoming Schools, which is put on by the Human Rights Campaign. So they advocate for the LGBT community, but they're also giving instructions to a lot of the districts on how to upgrade their policies. So Glenson, which is Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Educational Network, this is what you're gonna see at the junior high school and high school level. So in December, they recommend World AIDS Day, International Day of Persons with Disabilities. In January, Martin Luther King Day, Glenson No Name Calling. February, all month, Black History Month, then National Girl and Women Sports Day, National School Counseling Week, and then aromantic? I'm not sure what that is. Aromantic Awareness Week. I'm not sure what that is.
People who
Don't love anything? I'm not sure. March would be Women's History Month, National Read Across America Day, International Women's Day, LGBT Health Awareness Month, Transgender Day of Visibility. So as you can see, every month has something of somebody different, but every month has something LGBT. Yes, sir.
Others, I noticed that they are celebrating minorities, but they are promoting hate against the white male. This is what I noticed. They are celebrating.
Oh, all the minorities and promoting the hate amongst
hatred against the white man.
Yeah, they're maintaining racial division, and that's also a social agenda as well.
Yes, this is what I wanted.
So campus clubs are student activities, also known as campus activities, are student-focused extracurricular clubs and programs offered at colleges or universities. Students' activities are generally designed to allow students to become more involved in campus. But what clubs are on your children's campus? So they have clubs on campuses now. When we were dealing with Anaheim, we found out they had a boot camp at Spurgeon Junior High, and it was for, was it 10 to 14 years old?
I know there's something going on in Santa Ana.
Yeah, it was Santa Ana, but we were working in Anaheim, we found out that was going on in Santa Ana. So they had advertisement for the kids to come on a Saturday to have these clubs for,
They had a drag queen.
yeah, drag queen, and learn how to have makeup, and they were like clubs. So they didn't tell the parents, but they were allowed to go on Saturday. It was at a junior high school, which we were paying money for across the state. But something to ponder. You really need to find out what clubs are happening within your district and on your campuses. So this is an example. When we were dealing with Anaheim and I was trying to find out information on Diversity Week, we found out that they had an LGBT Equality Council and Conference, and they built a club to basically help the LGBT student. Now, this was pretty extensive. They did it with the LGBT Center of Orange County, also with professors at Cal State Fullerton, as well as PFLAG was involved and Equality of California. There was a Twitter post that said that they were happy to have trained Anaheim Elementary School for supporting like diversity with the LGBT children.
Oh,
and these
jeez.
there were 24 schools across Anaheim Elementary School District, elementary up to 6th grade. Okay, so when we look at some of the clubs, we have GSA, Every Student Matters. This is from Glenson, Safe Schools All Around. And so according to Glenson.com, research indicates that GSA, Gender and Sexuality Alliances, improve school climate, individual well-being, and educational outcomes for LGBTQ youth. Participation in GSA is related to stronger school connectedness and improved academic achievement for LGBT youth. And regardless of whether the LGBT student themselves participates in their school's GSA, just having a GSA in their schools can create a more positive school climate for the LGBT student. Now this is from Glenson. There was some controversy about their research because it was actually done online, so you can keep redoing the survey over and over again. So that's kind of like unethical data collection. So district-wide training. So these are trainings that happen across the district. So for example, in Anaheim, they had a district-wide training, and part of that had to do with safe zones, which is that club, that group. And one of the instructions that they received from the presenter told everyone across the districts that if a child is struggling with their gender identity, not to tell the parents. This was reconfirmed by, when I asked the superintendent about this, the vice superintendent, she said, yeah, that instruction was done, and they were not gonna undo that instruction. Yes?
And I think CTA just did a vote last week, and they approved,
Affirmation therapy?
puberty and, hormone blockers against, parent consent, without parent consent.
That, I think that's already in place though. I think children can walk off campus anyway to get those at 13. Now, if it's a lower age, I'm not sure of the lower age, but that is already in place, and so you know about all the centers being connected to the schools right now with
Right.
Planned Parenthood. So they can walk off of campus and be able to get those hormonal blockers.
What centers?
At Planned Parenthood, they're being
Oh,
connected to all the
Planned-
schools.
Oh, Planned Parenthood's doing it.
Yeah,
But they're not being called Planned Parenthood. They're under like an umbrella, and they're providing medical services. They're kind of
Is that
And-
FAC family
Yeah.
or whatever?
Excuse me?
Planned Parent, it's kind of FAC family. They're also giving out the abortion pill.
Yes, all of that is together, and they don't need to get consent, right?
Yeah, we
No.
have, 20
Arthur.
Arthur, we have one of those in Torrance on Hawthorne Boulevard, going up the hill.
Oh, I know where that is.
yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Is this
Near
just
the
in
library.
California, or is this happening around the country?
It's happening around the world.
It's happening around the
It's
world.
just, California's very progressive. It was
It's happening in
Massachusetts.
Taiwan.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's,
Who's pushing? Who's pushing? Like, who's
well,
pushing?
the
The devil.
WHO, the World Health Organization, and then,
George Soros.
Agenda.
yeah, there's a lot of people at the top that are pushing, it's a
very
social,
global.
it's a social
globalism.
agenda.
It's
Yeah,
globalism.
Yeah.
It's an aspect of it.
yeah. So I think it started in Massachusetts, and then it went to, a mid-city, and then it started in California, it started San Francisco, kind of trickled down, and now the laws are in place, and so it's more progressive in California now. Yeah. So, to maintain professional development for district-wide training and policies, the most recent policies for California have been the curriculum, AB 329 and SB 48, but now they're tying in harassment policies and Title IX policies. So what you see is that, this is what they'll do. They'll have someone move into the district, they'll put a child in the child will say, I don't feel comfortable, and then here come the policies updated and changes in the whole school system for maybe 1 or 2 children out of 12,000 children. So this was an example of a district-wide training, making schools better for the LGBT student. Anaheim Elementary School District was proud to host one-day conference this week on making schools better for LGBT students. And like I said before, 21st schools, all the way up to 6th grade, predominantly Spanish speaking. Were the parents notified? No. Was this put in Spanish? No. So are we looking at violations of notification? Yes. Are we looking at First Amendment civil rights violations? Yes. But parents need to be aware to be able to push back. So these are examples of district-wide training, which is the Safe Zone. Safe Zone project is a campus-wide program that offers a visible message of inclusion, affirmation, and support to the LGBT community. There's also a curriculum that goes to this that does not need to necessarily be approved, because typically curriculum has to be approved by a board. This has not been approved, and they can use this information for a child who's maybe confused.
So why can't heterosexual children have their safe zone? I mean,
I mean, I've gone down the line with that.
You know.
There's so many variables of people that need support. I mean, ideally, there's so much of this bombardment on our children. yeah, it's.
How-
Anybody under
how- you know.
220 should be able to get that. And it's not happening because it's an agenda. This has
Yeah.
been put in place since the 30s. Okay, sorry about that. Let's go back. Harassment policies. So discriminatory harassment policies under board policies include harassment on the basis of gender, which may include acts of verbal, nonverbal, physical aggression, intimidation, or hostility based on gender or sex stereotyping, even if those acts do not involve conduct of a sexual nature. So, for example, if somebody wants to say, oh, you know what, I was being harassed by this person because they called me gay, they can come in and say, okay, we need to put in something in place for this child. From there, they bring in the safe zones. From then, they bring in Equality California to update these policies and just change the whole environment of the school and the district. So all it does is take one. So updates under harassment policies. These updates have expanded for the LGBT community. Harassment policies updates have come from the state, but many updates come from activist agencies such as Glenton, Equality California, or PUFPAC. So when you go back into these laws and you look down below who is pushing them, you'll see a lot of these names on the bottom of these laws that are in California. Also, if you go into board policies at the schools and you look at the last update and look at the referencing sources, you'll see these names connected to the referencing source within the board policies of the school district. So you really have to dig to look for this information, but that's bias. It's like, how are you guys making recommendations for something that you pushed a bill and now you're in the school telling them how to update the policies?
Are these well-funded organizations, or are they grassroots? Like, are they?
No, they're pretty well funded. I think they're getting
Joint
donations. Yeah, they're pretty well. This is like a big social agenda. Yeah. So per Glenson regarding harassment policies, so they gave the schools the instructions on how to do this. Comprehensive policies. You can go to the website. Passing and implementing comprehensive policies around key issues for LGBTQ students is crucial to ensuring that LGBT students can learn and grow in a supportive environment. This can include harassment, bullying, and non-discriminative policies, policies for facilities accessibility for transgender, non-conforming, and non-binary students, policies affirming trans and gender non-conforming students' participation in athletics. So there are a number of ways educators and schools can support inclusive, comprehensive policies, as well as fight against discriminatory state legislation like no promo homo laws. Check out our resources to learn about the importance of enumeration in anti-bullying policies and our model policies to help guide your own advocacy efforts in your state, district, and school. So they're giving you the outline right here. So how does this direction affect your personal upbringing of your child if it's all throughout the school? You have no say in it. You don't even know what's happening. Your child's coming home. Do you want to share what happened with some relatives that happened recently?
Just last week, my kids do go to ABC Unified School District, and I have a little niece who is 7 years old. She asked last week her mom, she said, Mom, how do you know I'm a girl? And then my nephew, who's 9 years old, said, well, I think I want to be a girl. I would like to be in a girl's body. And so these are the problems that we're seeing, because now they're, implanting the seeds, and these kids are asking questions, they're curious, and then from the curiosity, they get onto other things. So it's really impacting them.
That's actually why I'm here. My 9-year-old son told my roommate, how do I know if I'm gay or not?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
How do you know what?
How do I know if I'm gay or not?
Right.
And then she said, well, where did you hear that word gay? He said,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah. And it's being,
Mm-hmm.
taught at every level, starting in kindergarten. They're all being trained, and like she said, they're putting it and into different aspects of the school. It's not just sex ed anymore, it's throughout everything, in everything, at everything.
You need to. I would recommend pulling your child.
Yeah.
Honestly, I pulled my child.
ABC, and
Yeah,
actually,
he's
they're doing
homeschooled
the
now.
positive one, which is the
We can talk later, but I just pulled him because they wanted to read
Yeah.
Jacob's Dress and they would not give me what they were gonna do. I had to do public records to
That's
pull
the
it.
worst of the worst.
And they were gonna do Jacob's Dress, and I think they were gonna have a transgender person come up there.
Well, it's funny that you're talking about it, because my twins are going into 7th grade, and they might get kicked out of school because of mandatory
They're already
vaccination.
on it, so if you get that
So you could,
message.
I would recommend homeschooling. Homeschooling does not mean they stay at home all day. You just have to find a facility that they go for a certain amount of time throughout the day.
Yeah.
You would have to get a network or a community, and it's doable. It's just, you have to orchestrate it.
Right.
Some churches actually give space to the homeschoolers.
So
And
it's something-
usually it's
Raise your
evangelical.
hand.
There's more homeschool co-ops popping up around here, and we're trying to establish one too, the AJ4KIDS eventually. We just have a lot going on right now.
And sometimes the parents, they co-teach, so some parents are better at science and some parents are better in math.
Okay, you guys, I'm gonna go forward
and-
because we're on a time constraint, okay? Not trying to be rude. So some of the links that are coming up, like for example, California bill forces student IDs to have Planned Parenthood phone numbers on the back of them. When you go into Teen Talk, it talks about different South Bay clinics. Now on Safe Zones, there's a link to the LGBT community or the site in Santa Ana. So when they're popping up these assemblies, when they're bringing in these flyers, there's links that these kids get access to. Going forward, online digital library. Okay, so this is just the form that a teacher received how to access it. So these are digital books that the kids can get access to. Did a search on this, LGBT. So, grade 4 through 8, Pride, Celebrating Diversity and Community. This is from the state of California. Further down, we have PK to 2nd grade, the day in June. Culture area, LGBT. 7 through 12, 2 boys kissing. Another area that doesn't have to get approval, teachers' personal libraries. Teachers are allowed to bring in books for personal access and to teach children. These books do not require approval. What books are within your teacher's personal library? Does your teacher support teaching the components of comprehensive sexuality education, which includes diversity, non-traditional relationships, genders, children, or sexual at birth? Now, at Anaheim, when we did the public record request, there was the group that was formed, the LGBT committee, and reading through the emails, a lot of teachers promoted children taking down those social constructs of gender without telling their parents. It was scary, very scary. Here's
Oh
another
my
book
God.
that has come up. This one, I don't know what grade this is for, but this is an example of like a teacher can have this book in her library and you would never know. Here's another one, Jacob's Dress. This one right here, I should have put this in another area, but how do we know the teacher does not support a gender support plan for the transgender and the non-binary school? Because these kids are reading these books. How do you know this child is not going to go to the teacher and say, hey, I feel like a girl, and then they start filling out this form, and they're not obligated to tell you,
Oh my.
even at the elementary school level. So, third parties coming onto the campus are individuals that do not work within the school district. They can be a speaker for a day in the classroom, an agency to present for an assembly, or a trainer for the district. So, as we mentioned before, you had the LGBT Agency of Santa Ana coming in to do a presentation on Jacob's Dress and training to say that if a child is struggling with gender identity, not to tell the parents. Third parties.
Wow.
So, this one right here, Gender Diversity and LGBT Inclusion in K through 12. This was written by a Cal State Fullerton professor who was coming to the campus where the teachers and admins were going to the college to get information on how to do inclusion K through 12. Now, when we were countering the school board, we were going to public comments, this professor actually came to the public comment to counter parents being concerned about the sexuality coming into the school. So we had the LGBT community of Santa Ana, we had a Cal State Fullerton professor, and then we had somebody from Equality California doing public comment to say that, why are you guys countering this? And they don't even have children in the district.
Well, and the problem is the messaging, right? Because it's inclusion and equality and diversity. Like, these are all words that we grew up trusting and thinking there's no weird agenda, but now it's like upside down universe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one.
Because they're excluding, it sounds like they're excluding.
It's discriminatory because you're pushing your value system upon others without telling your parents. It's parent alienation.
Mm-hmm.
You're teaching my child something else that I'm not teaching at home, so you're basically creating abuse,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Yes or no, right? It's symbolic,
Absolutely.
parent alienation.
And I think I have to, this to me is the most important thing I have to stress is that they're teaching stuff that is fraudulent, it's destructive. These are behaviors that are destructive. Transgenderism is a mental disorder, homosexuality is a mental disorder. These are not things that people should be engaging in. And it's gotten to that point where people said, oh, well, people want to live their lives, whatever, but this is what we've got to know. It's been forced into every aspect.
Every aspect
We
of
have
life.
to speak to this, otherwise they're going to say, well, you need to just get with the times. If it stays only in the lane, if it only stays in the lane of, I have my preferences, you have your preferences, well, why can't I have my space?
Right.
And the answer has to be, because this is a law.
Right,
If you're a boy, there's nothing wrong with it. If you're a girl,
Right.
there's no changing that.
right. And
Mhm.
so that's why it's important for parents to know this stuff. It's important to, get those public records and fight back about it. Like I said before, notification is not happening. That's a violation. Civil rights violation. I mean, you have these communities that the first language is not English. Okay, you guys did not notify the parents. How are you guys getting away with this?
Mhm.
But parents don't know, so they can't fight back. So it's not until you start ordering those public records and you start pulling your kids out of school that it's going to affect the school district, and they're going to start losing money and the awareness. So it's real important to really get involved and start unraveling all of this. So, like I mentioned before, LA County is putting some of the mini clinics on the high school campuses. This was recently updated in December. Title IX, which has to do with Education Amendment of 1972. It protects people from discrimination based on sex in education programs or activities that receive federal financial assistance. Title IX states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefit of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Now, I found a PDF file that was written by a lawyer, how to bring this into the schools under Title IX. It's like 100 pages. Incredible.
Wait, how to bring this
The
curriculum?
LGBT agenda into the school under Title IX. It was like 100 pages long PDF. So when they start saying they're feeling discriminated, this is when you have the safe zones coming in, which has a curriculum, which was originally designed for college. You see right here, we have a teacher with the safe zone sign on. And as I was mentioning before about the Youth Empowerment Act out of Santa Ana, this is for the LGBT Center on 4th. Now previously it was at Spurgeon Junior High School. Now I believe they're doing it at the center, but it's from 14 to 24. I'm sorry, I'm confused. Why should a 14-year-old be hanging out with anyone beyond 14 or 15? They should be categorized. Why are these
That's right.
kids all categorized with this? It doesn't make any sense.
It's grooming.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So parents, did you know about all this? Do these views complement the foundation you are bringing your children with? What are the next steps? So, do you guys have any questions at this point? No. A lot of information, right? So, I've been working, how long have we been working together, author?
We've been working since, approximately last September.
Okay. I've been saying from the
2018. So
2018. I've been saying it's not about AB 329. It's about the whole global implementation of a behavior cognitive modification program. This is what it is. This is intense. This is scary. The kids are going to be confused.
They're grooming them.
Yeah, and anxious.
Yeah.
And anxious. I mean, they're displaying mental illness
Yeah,
with this
they're
agenda.
They're creating borderline personality disorder. That's what they're creating. The executive function is being compromised. They can't plan. They can't organize. They're confused. They're creating mental illness. So,
Why should they have to worry what gender they are? And if being a girl and a boy, that's not good enough. You have to be more this and more that, and it's like it's not cool to be just a girl or a boy.
because it's a social agenda to unravel society.
That's right. Yeah.
And I may sound like a conspiracist, but when you start putting all that in the minds of a child whose brain is black and white and that area is gray, you're creating confusion. You're creating a child who's going to have borderline personality disorder. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I want to add to that. It's the radical feminist agenda to emasculate the boys like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are born as aggressive, and we already take the initiative, and the feminist movement doesn't like it. They think that men are already being rapists, men are already oppressive to women. They are pushing this agenda to emasculate the boys, so the boys can be passive and they don't want to be
Won't be
aggressive.
masculine
Yeah.
anymore. And then, hence, look at the tight pants. Yes, ma'am.
What I've heard and what my major concern is that they're pushing some of this agenda is to lower the age of consent.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly.
Because it goes back to that sexual bill of rights that I mentioned from 1966. It even goes back further than that to Kinsey.
Right.
Because to me, I mean, with the whole gay stuff, I'm either way. I don't care. What people do behind closed doors with
Well,
other
when they're
consenting adults, I don't care.
When they're adults, you don't care
Exactly.
what they're
With their
doing.
consenting adults behind closed doors, I really don't care. But I feel like they are confusing children if they're exposing them to some of this at such a young age.
Yeah,
they're
because-
planting the seeds for them to
It's
be
social
confused and ask
grooming.
a lot of questions. Like she said, it's creating a really bad base.
Yeah, you know, in my
Problems and stuff.
community, there's a Boy Scout troop, and only girls are in it.
Right, they dismantled that, I think a few months ago, I think it was last year.
Girl Scouts?
Because they want to take the gender, and now I believe Planned Parenthood is supporting Girl Scouts now. They did something recently.
Yeah,
Planned
Planned
Parenthood.
Boys,
Oh God, my
yeah, the
daughter's
Girl
a Girl
Scouts.
Yeah.
They're funded by
Planned Parenthood.
Yes, ma'am.
So my
Oh, really? The
grandparents were
Girl
like head
Scouts
honchos
supports-
for Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts. So we've had that all in our family for all these years. They recently just stopped because of the fact that our troop also went from being more girls than boys, and then to where now there was like 1 or 2 boys, and then they were like, no. What it is because when they felt that, okay, this is a boy thing to do and this is a girl thing to do. That's why there's Boy Scouts and there's Girl Scouts. And the girls wanted to do the thing that the boys were doing. Well, then why don't you just have them change the curriculum of the Girl Scouts? Don't make them come into the Boy Scouts. That was what like my grandparents were trying to fight for. And then they ended up just leaving because, you know, the girls just ended, they let them come in. But that was the problem, was that there was certain things that the boys did in their curriculum, and there's certain things that the girls did in their curriculum, and they just felt that it wasn't fair.
But it's also all part of the agenda, because it all started
Yeah.
happening around the same time.
Yeah. Okay.
My name is Dora, and I wanted to work with her and do the human trafficking one only because I recently took a class or a training on the commercialized sexualization and exploitation of children, and I got a lot of different things from it. But there was a lot of points or the different risk factors is what caught my attention, and I thought we should tie it together because some of the risk factors are porn, social media, apps, and of course, different materials. So, I don't know, Shonda didn't explain to you guys a little bit about a lot of the images that these kids are getting. It's a lot of soft porn images. And the curriculum includes it, and they're being sexualized, and they're also targeting special ed classes.
They're targeting special ed classes for
Yeah.
sexual.
Yeah, theirs are a little bit more graphic. So the images that are being taught to the special ed classes are a little bit more graphic. And so there's been a lot of problems reported because these children are going around and they're kind of curious, or they're repeating a lot of the things that they've been taught. So now they're getting into trouble. So some facts about human trafficking. The United States, along with Mexico and the Philippines, was ranked one of the world's worst places for human trafficking in 2018. In the U.S., there's no official number of human trafficking victims, but estimates it place it in the hundreds of thousands. And since 2007, more than 49,000 cases of human trafficking in the U.S. have been reported to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which receives an average of 150 calls per day. And the most human trafficking cases have been reported here in California, Texas, Florida, according to the hotline. So it's estimated that between 18 and 20,000 victims are trafficked into the United States every year, and children are more vulnerable than adults. I wanted to show you guys a quick video.
Right here in the U.S., thousands of kids are trafficked and prostituted. If you think these aren't our kids, you're wrong. These are our kids, our friends' kids, our neighbors' kids, kids with low self-esteem, or just looking to belong, that are easy prey to pimps and traffickers.
My friend, she was really upset 'cause she was like, I think he's really gonna be upset if we don't have any money. And so we had to keep going to tracks. And sometimes we would stop and we would cry.
These children are cut off from their families. They suffer violence and sexual abuse.
And I just wanted to die. And I started to just think that maybe I deserved this for doing this to all my parents and to myself.
These kids are not criminals. They are victims. We all have to help them and give them what they need to go from being victims to survivors.
And we'll go over the signs afterwards. Also, children based in foster care have a greater chance of becoming victims. And in 2013, 60% of the child victims the FBI recovered were from foster care. And in 2017, 14% of the children reported missing were likely victims of sex trafficking, and 88% of those had been in child welfare. And this is what the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reported. So I went to a training with Nora Brantley, and she's somebody that has a really good information and does a training. I'll give you guys information about this. She was trafficked at the age of 15 by a cop who knew that she was a victim and vulnerable, and then she went on to be trafficked by, because he became a security guard for Prince, and that's how she was being trafficked for a long time. And so her story is really interesting, and now she has a training that's coming up soon so that we can become trainers and know the warning signs. She also told us about a story about a little girl who was basically trafficked from foster care. She was sexually abused from the moment that she went into that household. She was 1 to 2 months old. By 15 years old, she was already in commercialized sexual exploitation, and she doesn't even know where she's at anymore. But this was happening by her foster parents who were selling her to the system. So sexual exploitation is engaging a minor in under the age of 18 in an obscene sexual act. It's traded for food, shelter, drugs, and clothing. And commercial sexual exploitation of children is sexual activity involving a minor under the age of 18 in exchange for something of value or promise of thereof to the minor or another person. And so the interesting thing about this is that sexual exploitation is engaging in minor in the under the age of 18 in an obscene sexual act. What are we doing when we're teaching our kids this curriculum, right? If we were to teach our kids this curriculum, we go to jail. We'd be in jail for childhood sexual abuse, okay? And other than the sex trade, trafficking victims often work in private residences, on farms, in the hospitality industry, in the health and beauty service industry, seen here in the Orchids of Asia, Day Spa in 2019. Its owners were arrested on prostitution charges, which was part of a larger investigation on the role of human trafficking in massage parlors. And migrant farm workers can become trafficking victims because of their legal status in the U.S. is often tied to employment, according to a 2017 report. That most commonly worked crop for victims was tobacco, followed by cattle and dairy, oranges, tomatoes, and strawberries. So there are three, commercial sexual exploitation of children involves three types of people. The children who are victimized, those that buy the sex, and ones that exploit the youth. And examples of this is street prostitution, forms of internet-based, erotic nude massages, gang-based prostitution, child sex tourism, family, stripping, phone sex line, and pornography. So I wanted to show you guys this video of America's Daughters, and it's girls talking about their experience in sexual exploitation. Hopefully it'll turn on. It was really eye-opening to be able to go to this training because I put a lot of things together, and then I learned, like that little girl that was trafficked from birth, basically, and that's how they talk about the family, is because these families, adopted families, are trafficking these children. Maybe it's not going to play, but if you guys want to watch it, it's called America's Daughters. And it's really sad because it's a lot of them talking about how they got into the commercialized college exploitation and how they were trafficked and who was trafficking them. There was school counselors, there was teachers, there was police, there's family. They were trafficking them, yeah. And it's really interesting, and I really do encourage you guys. I did bring information so that you guys can take the training with Nora Bradley, who was actually a victim herself. And this happened here in California, by the way. So the FBI identified 13 major hubs, and 3 of them are here in California. And according to Tina Front, founder of Courtney's House with Boys Transgender Youth, we find most enter trafficking between the ages of 6 and 10, usually mislabeled as a child abuse case.
Could you explain that? I'm sorry, I don't understand. So, I mean, so they're being trafficked, but that is a child abuse case. I don't understand why
Right.
it's mislabeled.
So they're mislabeled and they're put into foster homes or different things like that. So they're being,
Are you saying like for example, if a child is having like extraneous behavior, that you're saying the parents are doing it, but it's actually someone else out of the home
Yeah.
who's doing it, and so they get taken out of the parent's home and placed in the foster care, but it's
Right.
actually another individual.
yeah,
Okay, but mom and dad are guilty because they're pimping them out.
right. And then,
Well, it sounds like it's both.
Or wait a minute, it can also happen where the kid has been abused, but the parents don't know. Does this happen?
Yeah.
Where kids are being trafficked,
That
but they live
too.
at home.
yeah. And so they're going after a lot of our vulnerable children, and I'll give you some of the
Yeah.
people that they're going after,
That's
and
right.
that's why we have
Boys
to be
are
really
victims too.
careful, yeah.
That's right.
So it says boys can be victims of childhood, oh my god, sexual exploitation of children, yeah. So once male minors become homeless, they're most frequently recruited into sexually exploitative activities by peers or potential customers. The likelihood of experiencing the latter form of recruitment increases greatly for gay males or transgender youth. And male minors don't usually work with a pimp, although they may work with a market facilitator to sell themselves, as may often be the case in ball culture or voguing. And this is an overview of a study that was done in San Diego. Estimated that there being 8,839,000 to 11,773 sex trafficking victims in the county. And human trafficking is the second largest underground economy after drug trafficking. Significant recruitment is happening on high school and middle schools. In the average victim is trafficked at about 3 years before reaching the attention of law enforcement. And African American street gangs use social media to recruit and pimp out women and girls. And the study that San Diego State was the one that did this, and it's called The Nature and Extent of Gang Involvement in Sex Trafficking in San Diego County.
Is that the same school where the guy's teaching that pedophilia is a gender? No?
No, that's a college campus. This is actually a study. Oh,
But is it the same
yes,
university?
yes, it is.
Wait, really quick about the social media thing, the last point up there.
Yeah.
Are these African American street gangs exploiting in African American communities?
Yes.
Or all
African
over?
American communities. Actually, it was noted in this study that Latinos don't use that. They actually use word of mouth with the gangs, and the gangs are big in trafficking as well. So that was interesting about this study. And LGBTQ youth make up 5 to 7% of the youth population, but 20 to 40% of the homeless population. And most common pathway through entry was through a peer or following by being approached by a buyer. So we have a lot of LGBT youth homeless around here, and that's one of the ways that they're being trafficked and being exploited. The youth with intellectual disabilities, this is, they're at an increased risk. They lack awareness of exploitation. They have the inability to self-identify as a victim. They're marginalized by law enforcement when they do disclose. They're not like believed because of their disabilities. And they meet people online. And then also unaccompanied youth. There was 50,000 unaccompanied minors across the southward border in 2018, 17% increase. And they're at an increase for also trafficking. And then here's some more this one, American Indian and Alaska Native youth exploitation dating back to the colonization of the United States. There's an overrepresentation of Native American youth in foster care, high prevalence of domestic violence and sexual violence against Native American women, and Native girls and women may be targeted because of their perceived vulnerability, because of their marketability as exotic and because of the barriers to effective law enforcement on tribal lands. 5,712 cases of missing American Indian and Alaska Native women and girls, only 116 were logged into the Department of Justice database.
Oh,
African American youth, historical context of slavery, overrepresentation of African American youth in the foster care system. 47% of youth identified by Los Angeles DCFS were African American. And in Philadelphia and Phoenix, African American males were at an increased risk for childhood sexual exploitation. And then the undocumented youth. Abuse exploitation can go unreported and unseen. The abuse exploitation can be viewed as a taboo topic. They fear deportation for self and for family members, language barriers, and institutional barriers. And then back to the youth with intellectual disabilities, assumption of virginity, and they can be easily manipulated, and unfamiliarity with sexual behavior and lack of understanding to consent. And then gangs. Increase in gang involvement. The California Attorney General's State of Human Trafficking in California 2012 report indicated that local and transnational gangs are increasingly trafficking human beings because it is low risk and high renewable profit crime. So after you sell guns and drugs, there's no more product to sell. People can be sold over and over and over again. California has the largest intersection of gangs and sex trafficking in the U.S. Nearly 1 in 5 arrested for exploitation was in California, was gang affiliated. Gangs and sex trafficking in San Diego. This is that one study I referred to earlier. The underground sex economy generates an estimated $810 million in annual revenue. 110 gangs are involved. 85% of exploiters were gang involved, and the number of female recruiters and exploiters is growing. They come from all ethnicities. Number of white, black, and Hispanic exploiters was roughly equal. Hispanic exploiters tend to refer to themselves as protector or business partner, rather than a pimp. And in a study of the underground sex economy, in 8 large U.S. cities, 1 in 4 sex traffickers were former drug traffickers, and in another 40 cities, the sex traffickers were concurrently selling drugs. So, I want to show you this video on porn, because a lot of the people in the porn industry are also being trafficked.
Yep. And drag culture is
Yeah,
connected to it.
a lot of them
big
are being,
time.
most of them are being trafficked, and they have a handler.
Yep.
And this is what it talks about. So the video basically just talks about, like, you see this woman and she looks really pretty, she's presenting really well, she's, showing you that she's liking what she's doing, but in reality somebody's making her do that, and when she's done, she's broken and she's being abused. So why we don't want to encourage our kids to be looking at porn. Oh, there you go.
This is Anna. Wait, don't click to someone else yet, because Anna's stuck here on your computer screen. And while you can walk away, her image is stuck on the internet. See, your fantasy is Anna's nightmare. There's a good chance recruiters lured her with flattery. Perhaps they baited her with cash. Maybe they even tranquilized her with date rape drugs. And if Anna's like many others, she stays sedated with alcohol, weed, or coke to numb the pain. Chances are she faces STDs and HIV because she's denied access to protection. We don't know what she's been through because we only see Anna smiling. And they keep showing Anna smiling so that you'll keep watching. See, pornography is integral to human trafficking and prostitution. In 9 countries, almost half, 49%, said that pornography was made of them while they were in prostitution. This generation fights sex trafficking more than anyone ever has, and more than anyone ever has, this generation consumes porn. Fighting human trafficking and then watching porn is like protesting a corrupt politician and then donating to his campaign. You browse privately, going from Anna to Zoe and back to Anna. Watch your favorite fantasy and then walk away. But Anna's still there. She's stuck there, stuck in this life because you click. Each click Each link, each URL visit and play button, this is the currency of porn. This is the price of Anna's life. The $100 billion pornography industry is fueling the appetite for children as well. Teenage girls now make up the biggest slice of viewable porn, which by definition is considered trafficking. The demand for porn fuels the trafficking industry, and you can take away that demand. You can cut the cord on this machine. You can bankrupt the system. You can empty the pimp's pockets. You can free Anna by simply refusing to click.
Rescue freedom.
So there's a website called Fight the New Drug, and it's basically fighting porn. And there's a lot of different studies, and I think I'm going to refer to the study later on, but basically what this is doing is creating curiosity in our children. And once you start watching porn, it's very addictive. It affects the same part of our brain where substance abuse does. So we want more and more and more. So we turn to more forms of masochistic and like anal sex, different types of sex. And this is what we want to try and prevent, because you're kind of like planting that seed, showing them those images, then they're going to want more and more and more and more. Sorry. So the age of entry differs by gender. Age of entry can range from 7 to 22. Average age of females is 14 to 16. Average age for boys is 15 to 17. And more boys entered before age 13 compared to girls. And average age for transgender youth is 16 to 17. This is a map of human trafficking. Can happen anywhere, but some people are more vulnerable than others. Significant risk factors include recent immigration or relocation, substance use, mental health concerns, involvement with the child welfare system, and being a runaway or homeless youth. Often, traffickers identify and leverage their victims' vulnerabilities in order to create dependency. So they know who to look for, they know where to go, they know to the schools, and then like Shonda was talking earlier, they're targeting, what schools are they targeting?
Mostly where there's a language barrier.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
So where does it occur? In school, in neighborhoods, the mall, outside county buildings, foster homes, bus stops, the internet, social media, and apps. Shonda did tell you guys about a lot of these, this curriculum encourages them to go on social apps, and it's also linked to pornographic images, a lot of different information that these kids don't need to be having at all. And then the risk factors: poverty, not getting basic needs met, family abuse and neglect, troubled relationships, drug and alcohol, physical abuse, sexual abuse, teen relationship violence, and sexual violence. So this is an example, and I'm sorry because this is really horrific language, but it was used for us, and I wanted to show it to you. So this is social. This was on Rolling Stone magazine, and it says, I did a Playboy tour, and I had a bus follow me with 10 bitches on it. I could fire a bitch, fuck a bitch, get a new hoe. It was my program, city to city, titty to titty, hotel room to hotel room, athlete to athlete, entertainer to entertainer. That was Snoop Dogg's words. And then there's this one. A screenshot posted by a player who killed a prostitute with a hatchet to get their money back. Grand Theft Auto was the best-selling console game of the decade. It was just announced, I think, on 1/16/2020. And the demand. Man who buys sex had more sex partners, significantly less empathy for women, obtained the sex education from pornography, masturbated to pornography, and imitated it with partners, which resulted in preferences of more extreme forms of sex. Such dynamics have triggered considerable concerns among parents, policymakers, and the scientific community about potentially harmful outcomes associated with the sexual ed curriculum. Used among those concerns suggested links between the curriculum and adverse adolescent health outcomes, particularly in the form of sexual and reproductive health risk, occupy a central position. So this is the study that I wanted to tie back. So they know that this is obviously a problem, right? And what can we do to prevent human trafficking? Buy responsibly from fair trade certified providers. Know the indicators and the red flags. So Polaris Project is a really good organization to go to. And here you can go in there and it tells you who is most vulnerable. It can happen to anyone and it's happening in your own backyard. Are common in the anti-human trafficking field. Technically, they are true. Anyone can be trafficked in any community, just as anyone can be the victim of any kind of crime. But the real story is that while it can happen to anyone, available evidence suggests that people of color and LGBTQ people are more likely to be trafficked than other demographic groups. That's not a coincidence. Generational trauma, historic oppression, discrimination, and other societal factors and inequities create community-wide vulnerabilities. Traffickers recognize and take advantage of people who are vulnerable in certain ways. People you know might be vulnerable to trafficking if they have an unstable living situation, have a history of domestic violence, are runaways, are facing poverty, are addicted to drugs, undocumented, have a caregiver or family member who has a substance abuse issue, and history of sexual abuse. How traffickers lure people in. Stories become weapons in the hands of human traffickers. Fantastical tales of romantic love, everlasting and happily ever afters, or tall tales about decent jobs, good wages, waiting for vulnerable workers just over the horizons. Here are a few situations that might raise concern, and this is where we can begin to pay attention and notice some of these changes, especially if we see these changes in our kids while they're using a lot of the social media. So a would-be employer refuses to give workers a signed contract or asks them to sign a contract in a language they can't read. A would-be employer charges a potential worker fees for the opportunity to work in a particular job. A friend, family member, co-worker, or student appears to be newly showered with gifts or money, or otherwise become the object of some kind of overwhelming, fast-moving, and asymmetric, young, older, wealthy, struggling romantic relationship. Family member, friend, co-worker, or student developing a relationship which seems too close with somebody they know solely on social media. Family member, friend, or co-worker is offered a job opportunity that appears too good to be true. And a family member, friend, or co-worker is recruited for an opportunity that requires them to move far away, but the recruiter, prospective employer, evades answering their questions or is reluctant to provide detailed information. And you can also program the national hotline number, share with 5 others, consider becoming a foster parent, and volunteer at a local shelter, so you can kind of get a feeling for who and what, is involved in these type of cases as well. And this is another YouTube.
My mom was 15 years old when a new boy from school raped her, and it was very brutal and very traumatizing, and she didn't say anything to anybody. But then when she found out she was pregnant with me, she said, well, we were in it together. And when she told me that, I was really young, but it stuck with me that she recognized me as a person, even though I was, microscopic, basically. She married him because she thought he was going to get better somehow. But after 2 years of brutality and on the verge of suicide, pregnant again, she called her mom and she said, look, if you don't get me out of here, I'm going to kill myself. But for reasons I'll never fully understand, she still sent us back there to my paternal grandmother's house. And that's where he had access to us. And so my earliest memories is of sexual abuse. My mom's second marriage was a respite for me. When she married, we had like this normal life at his house. At my paternal grandmother's house, there was work to be done. The abuse became more deviant and more violent. I'm not sure exactly how old I was, but I stopped going to my paternal grandmother's house. And my mom got a divorce, and I was a latchkey kid, which meant that I was home when she was at work or out or whatever, and I took care of my baby sister, and she had other people living there sometimes, so maybe only a month or 2 months where she had an uncle come and stay, or my grandmother would come and live for a while, or her friend would come, and my uncle molested me when I was 13, and it just kind of flipped a switch for me because I had.
Sorry, that wasn't the one. It's this one. Yeah. They're all really good, and you guys could just Google a lot of these videos so you can kind of get some of these stories and what these girls are going through. But
Today, if you saw somebody chained to a post, you would do something about it. But in the days of the transatlantic slave trade, it was a normal sight to see. It isn't as clear today of what modern slavery looks like. But by knowing the signs of human trafficking, you can help protect yourself and you can help protect others. Traffickers would often brand their victims with tattoos, using words such as daddy or cash. Trafficking victims may show sudden changes of dress and behavior. They may suddenly have possessions that they usually can't avoid. They may have unusually long work hours. Victims may have new relationships with boyfriends or girlfriends that are noticeably older, and I'm not talking about a few years. Difficulty with making eye contact, especially with men. Victims may have untreated medical problems such as cuts, bruises, burns, broken bones. They may miss school frequently, make frequent trips. Victims may be unable to speak independently. Other people may insist on answering questions for them, or even translating for them. Victims may even be frightened of authorities, seeing them as the bad guys. To request help or report possible human trafficking incidents, please call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 1-888-3737-888, or text info or help to BeFree 233-733.
So when I took the training with Noel Brantley, it was interesting because she said that a lot of these pimps, they take these girls who sometimes are like 12, 13, 14 years old. Guess where they take them? Planned Parenthood. And they have sometimes 15 abortions. By the time they're done trafficking, they're not even able to have children anymore because they're already infertile. And Planned Parenthood does not ask because they present themselves as the parents. So they don't even ask any information. And this is a program that has been going on for years and years and years. And this is happening here in California.
And they just moved into LA Unified.
Yeah, and they just moved into LA Unified with those health centers that Shonda is talking about.
Tie that into the teachers being able to
Right.
create that confidentiality and X the parents out.
Right.
And you have the perfect dynamic.
And then remember, the CTA just discussed it last week. There is a website called Informed Parents for California. CTA just did announce there's a video of them that they decided that if a child wants to become transgender, wants to have puberty blockers or hormone blockers, we do not need to consent. They can take our child to these health centers, and that's why they're also being placed. And this is why it's so important to be able to tie it together. So, these are some of the organizations, and this is, right. So, Dr. King, I would really want you guys to write down his name. He wrote a poem about his experience. I didn't want to bring it because it does have a lot of information that might be overwhelming, and it is really sad what he went through. So, a sexual abuse and trafficking survivor himself, Dr. John A. King is an author, poet, longtime activist, and founder of the Give Them a Voice Foundation in Grapevine, Texas, which he launched in 2015 to provide advocacy, support, resources, and rescue for those who have been sexually abused or trafficked. In 2008, King experienced a complete recall of suppressed memories for more than a decade of sexual abuse and exploitation by his parents and their friends. Determined not to be seen simply as a victim of exploitation, he put himself through relearning the leadership principles he had taught to others for years. A dynamic speaker, King uses his personal experience to connect with the many people who have suffered abuse, post-traumatic stress, disorder, and exploitation recovery. He recently wrote a book, Deal With It, to share his personal story of recovery from sexual abuse and PTSD. So this one is fantastic. I really recommend that you guys watch or listen to his poem, but it is very graphic. And then this is Nola Brantley. Hold on, where to go? Nola Brantley. She's the one that you guys can take the training on. So this is her training. CSEC, which is Childhood Sexual Exploitation of Children 101, is an essential training for social service, juvenile justice, mental health, public health, community-based and faith-based service provided throughout the country. The Nola Brantley Speaks CSEC 101 provides a comprehensive look at the victimization of youth, buyers, and individuals who exploit youth. Many of the current CSEC 101 curriculums focus solely on the victimization of girls. And while this is an important topic to discuss, there are many other populations to discuss. It will cover the victimization of girls, boys, and LGBT youth. The trainers will discuss the specialized populations such as African American youth, Native American youth, and immigrant youth. Participants will learn how to adapt their trainings based on the geographical location, similarities and differences in rural areas versus metropolitan cities. In addition, participants will be more equipped to help others identify youth involved in the commercial sex industry. The trainers will also discuss the demand side of the commercial sex industry, so participants are equipped to teach to answer questions about the buyers and the individuals who exploit the youth. This is her website. She has hundreds of trainings all the time that you guys can attend. These are all of the different trainings she has. She was trafficked herself. She was the one that was trafficked at 15 years old by a cop, who then became a security guard for a prince.
So what's her name?
Nola Brantley. And her foundation...
Nola Bradley?
Brantley. And her foundation is called Nola Brantley.
How do you spell that?
NOLA Speaks. Her vision is advocating for a more empowered world for women and girls. Mission, Nola Brantley Speaks exists to empower a community of advocates through training, curriculum development, and event coordination to create a community of support for girls and young women escaping the commercial sex industry. And then there's a Polaris project. They're fantastic. They've also done a lot of the work.
Does her course cost?
It's free. All of her training are absolutely free. I just registered for one, I think it's April 4th. 10 to 2, I think, at the Hilton. Yeah, everything she does is free. So this is the Polaris website. You can go on here and also find ways to help, and kind of work they're doing, a lot of videos. They have a lot of a lot of the poems that these girls, from what these girls experienced. And here's a list of, I don't know why it's not up there. Here's a list. It's basically childwelfare.gov, and it'll give you like 20 different prevention and intervention organizations that are involved if you guys want to get involved and help to be able to
I'm so
spread this.
skeptic because it's .gov, and I'm like, isn't the government in on all this stuff?
It's hard, and I think that what we could just do is, get involved as much as we can. I understand your concerns about that, but I think get involved, pass out this kind of information. And like I said, I wanted to show this to tie it together with what Shonda wrote, because it is tied together. And if you look at it and you pay attention, there is a lot of stuff that is definitely tied together, and that's what we feel, right?
Yes, it's very tied together.
Yeah.
It's a grooming process.
Yeah, that's what we feel. They're grooming these
For
children.
maladaptive behavior,
Right.
so they can have access and there's consent.
Right. And then remember, who are mostly homeless and who are the most that are victimized? I mean, they said it, the research, LGBTQ youth, right? So,
Borderline personality disorders.
yeah,
So create them and then make them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they easily become victims,
right,
easily persuaded.
right. So what could we do and how can we get involved and have more of these and get more people to come and spread the word and let them know what's happening at our children's schools. And that was it. Do you guys have any questions? training that Nola Brantley does, just be prepared because it's really hard. I got out of there and she really pushes people for self-care because it's very hard. You hear a lot of different things. You hear her own poem and how she was brought up on this, brought up in the projects, raised around people. She was abused by her own dad at a very young age. And these traffickers know, they're going after a most vulnerable population.
Do you know, do individual cities keep like data or statistics about what's happening like within their own communities, or is it more like from a global perspective, like a larger perspective that they keep track of the numbers?
The one, are you talking about like for human trafficking?
Yeah, like if I wanted to make a difference in my community, like where, will I know, oh my gosh, there's 100 kids in our community that need help, or 50, or 10, or 1,000,
Yeah, no, I don't
I would
know.
think that it will be, wherever it's reported is where the data is gonna be collected. So I mean, you could start at local police stations and get like data from there, and then you go county, and then you could go state, depending on what has been prosecuted. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I mostly based it a lot of on the study that was done in San Diego, which was really shocking to us because San Diego is right down the street, and there's so many people that are being targeted there. Just remember that they are going after the most vulnerable. So what can we do to help that population? Get involved, talk to their parents. It does take a village to raise kids for sure. You guys have any questions?
What's the name of that website you usually, this organization?
Childwelfare.gov.
I got a question. Is this true that these human traffickers are also involved in the organ harvesting?
Did what?
Organ harvesting.
Harvesting.
Organ harvesting. I've heard that they do that a lot in China. I'm not sure about their.
Yeah, but I heard that there are human traffickers who are looking for organs, and that's why they kidnap those kids and adults.
I know that for the drug trafficking, they do. There has been a lot of cases where you can look that up and read it. I don't know about that though, where they do use a lot of the kids as mules to bring in drugs. Yeah.
As what?
As mules? Yeah, to bring in drugs, and they stuff their organs